think we should get the ball rolling. I mean, as I mentioned yesterday, if you were not here, we had quite a lot. We had presentations from NBC, ABM, MTN, MultiChoice Namibia, Road Authority, Telecom Namibia, MTC, Huawei, as well as Buy Dynamic. Well, today we're going to start off the day with a topic which is from an invited speaker, which is the importance of digitization, bridging the economic gap. And this one is from CRAN and is presented by Mr. Festus K. Mandeka. Please give him a round of applause. Okay, Mr. Mandeka, I've been informed that the clicker is not working, but you can just inform the wonderful people at the back here to proceed to the next slide when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Paul. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this early morning session. I know that most people are still on their way. Um, I feel honored to be the first speaker for the day, and I hope that by the time when I finish this presentation, the room will be full. I hope. Right, next slide, please. Right, I have been requested to talk about the importance of digitization, bridging the economic gap. Just before that, I would like to share with you some information that I came across last week. Can you go to the next slide, please? Next slide. Thank you. Now, I came across information in the New Era last week that says that 70% of government schools are without internet. So that's, in other words, out of 1,800, almost 1,900, 1,900 schools, only 590 have got access to internet. Of course, this is information that was shared by the Deputy Minister of Basic Education, Arts and Culture in Parliament. So when we are talking about digital economy, and we look at the number of schools that have access to internet at this stage, it's actually a very, very interesting observation. And as you sit here discussing, you know, the issue of digital transformation, we now need to look at some of these issues and ask ourselves what is that can be done to address some of those challenges in order to accelerate digital transformation. Now, just going to the background, as we all know that it has been long accepted that ICT is a catalyst for economic growth, and that's undisputable. World over, we have observed that countries with the economy that has been digitally transformed, they are doing way, way better. And it has been also submitted that ICTs are catalytic driver that enables achievements for the Sustainable Development Goals. These goals are quality education, good health, well-being, gender equality, industry, innovation infrastructure, boosting food production, clean water, sanitation, affordable and clean energy, and sustainable city and communities. Now, with regard to this presentation, I shall try then to highlight the impact of the, the digital transformation. I'll look at the advantages. I'll look at the ICT development trends. I'll also look at the challenges that things are going, where operators are busy building infrastructures, fiber to the home, fiber to the office. That will then have an impact. That we might see an uptake in those areas as well. Now, of course, we have realized that the digital economy is probably going to be the future. And it has been submitted that currently the digital economy stands at 12.9 trillion, and it's projected that it might grow up to 23 trillion in 2015. So that will be quite a big, substantial impact in the world economy. Now, there has been some studies done at the ITU to identify the certain key components and key architectures of digital society, as we are talking about digital economy. Of course, it has identified various aspects or certain layers based on the smart, sustainable cities. So first, you look at the city infrastructures. Then next is the sensing layers. Then the network layers that covers fiber to the homes, Wi-Fi, metro network, and the 3Gs, 4Gs, and 4Gs networks. And then you look at the data and support layers. Then on top, then we have the application layers. Look at the e-government, transport, logistics, et cetera, et cetera. But for all this then to work, you need various aspects or components to complement this. You need an environment that supports this, enabling environment. You need also digital inclusion that will then cover that to provide people with access to the services and infrastructure at affordable and accessible rate. And also need skills that will then help to harness this. Because for this system to work, you need people who are able to maintain the systems. And also you need capacity building for the users and for the people who shall be running these systems. And you need innovation so that we continue to enjoy the benefits of digital economy. Now, in terms of transformation, there are various processes that one can look at. We look at the framework, then the strategy. There's a roadmap just to highlight where the process is going, then implementation process. And we look at the pivot that looks at the studies that one has to look at, and the analysis to really look at whether the process is going in the right direction. Now, we look at the issue of growing the digital economy. For us to be able to really grow this process, digital economy, there must be certain elements there. There must be a supportive macroeconomic and business climate that will then cover issues like good tax policies, trade openness. We all know that if our systems are slow, if our systems are not accommodative, as we know now that currently, that's one of the key challenges that we are facing as a country. So that shall delay or hold back, the growing or the growth of the digital economy. And we also need to have robust competition policy that will then allow, the players to play in this environment, ecosystem. Then you also need to have some digital economy foundation that will then cover the issues of universal access to affordable and high-speed broadband. And you need skills, people, so that people have some sort of literacy to understand how to use, technology to take advantage of that. And also need to have proper payment systems and good logistical arrangements in place and proper digital policy regulations and digital ID. So these are the key elements that we require in order to be able to grow the digital economy. So now, at the top there, you need to have at least what they call digital entrepreneurs. So, of course, in a growing economy like ours, this is probably something that we have been talking about, but we need to do more to encourage them so that we can entice people, incentivize them to move into that direction, to take advantage of technology so that they are able to operate their businesses and to do their transactions using technology. And you also need proper, e-commerce platforms fintech, ICT sector, that we can then contribute to this process. Now, having said that, one has to look at the key areas or key benefits that the digital economy brings to the societies. First, digital economy promotes the use of technology. Of course, we know that without technology, this shall not become a reality. So with this, there has been a dramatic rise on the investments in various aspects of technology, be it in the hardware, technological research, software, service, digital communication, etc. And this is to ensure that at least technology is here to stay and to support the growing digital economy. Secondly, it also gives rise to e-commerce. Economic activities such as buying, distribution, marketing, selling of goods has become easier to do within the digital economy. Furthermore, there are certain goods and services such as banking and insurance. They will, in the long run, become more digitized. And furthermore, digital economy also promotes transparency. This is primarily because most of the transactions shall be conducted or are being conducted online. In such, it is actually we're moving away from cash payments. And that will then create a lot of transparency in doing the conducting transactions. So that we also hope that that will also help to curb corruptions and make the transactions and all the economic activities more transparent. Now, there are also challenges that comes with the digital economy. I think the most notable one, and we have heard of recent, that it may also bring about loss of employment. Of course, we have seen some examples in other economies. We heard in South Africa in the banking industry, in the broadcasting sector that one has to look at. Obviously, there might be a way to mitigate this situation by, preparing ourselves, reskilling our employees, making them more relevant, give them new, skills to be able to function within the digital economy. There's also a challenge of lack of expertise. Of course, as we all know, that the digital economy becomes very complex. It involves a lot of complex processes and technologies, and therefore, you need people who will be able to build, these systems and maintain the platforms. So we need a highly skilled, new brand of skills in the market that will be able then to sustain this economy. And we all know that in developing economies like ours, these skills are probably not there or are very, very scarce. So therefore, this is one of the challenges. Digital economy also requires heavy investment in that, we need to invest, heavily in the infrastructure, and we need to have high functioning internet systems. We need to have a strong mobile networks and telecommunications systems. So therefore, for us to be able to really, realize the dreams of having a digital economy or to accelerate this process and to bring about what we are saying, we need, digital transformation that we are looking at, we need to rethink probably our strategy and the models that we are using at this stage, and also look at the kind of investment that we are putting into this process and into research and development. Since this process is very slow, it's tedious, and it's very costly. So we need to see how best can we overcome those challenges to be able to accelerate this process. Now, there are certain barriers that have been identified by the ITU that basically, hampers digital transformation. Some of these barriers relates to the lack of coordination of mechanisms to develop contextual and relevant policies supporting digital innovation and entrepreneurship. So we all know that even in our own context, we seem to be struggling to find better coordination, how to harness technology to be able to use it to improve our systems, to improve our processes, and also to enhance the quality of education and the quality of business transactions. So we basically need to look at that and see how best we can find better coordination between our institutions, be it private and be it public. There is also challenges related to the unclear roles or engagement of stakeholders in developing their innovation ecosystem. As we all know that in our context, we seem to be working in silos. You know, when you look at how we function, of course, MICT is on its own. We have education, we have OPM, we have the private sector. So we need to redefine our roles within this ecosystem and come up with at least a workable solution that will enable us to pull in one direction to make sure that our roles are clearly defined to be able to complement this process. There are also missing innovation capabilities, especially in soft infrastructure, and also the issue pertaining to suboptimal integration of innovation ecosystem into the key sectors, and also the impact of the fast-changing ICT environment. So this, we feel that it's a reality, especially when you sit in a position of a regulator where you want to at least regulate certain aspects of technology or technological development. But since the process is developing so fast, by the time when you come up with, a framework to regulate that, things have developed, have changed. So now you keep on basically, on the back foot. And we need to find ways how to coexist or how to manage and live with those, the fast-changing ICT, developments. And there is also a key issue of digital literacy. This is very key in a sense that for people to be able to take advantage of, digital economy, you need to have, a certain degree of literacy. And this should not only be focused on the current users, even on future users. So we need to find ways, to integrate some sort of digital literacy into our curriculums, into our workplaces, so that people are educated how to use, how to apply technology. And this, I think, is a challenge to not only to educational institutions, but also to public and private institutions. It might be well that we may bring about, technology and people might have access to it. But if they are not properly trained how to use technology, then that will also delay and hamper the transformation into the digital economy. Now, to promote digital economy, for it to grow, we need to have some sort of, regulatory interventions. We know that the function of the regulator is really to ensure that, there is a level playing field, to promote at least some, degree of predictability and certainty within the legal framework in which the operators are operating, and also to ensure that it's a secure cyberspace. There are also some interventions that, can be done to accelerate the deployment of emerging technology so as to move towards the digital economy. Some of these interventions relates to the adoption of technology neutral license framework, also making more spectrum available for broadband, ensuring that spectrum is allocated for emerging technologies such as 5G, and promoting efficient use of technology, of course, of spectrum rather. Of course, we know that this is a debate that has been going on, but we need to relook at how best are we using the spectrum that is allocated to us. And also we need to look at, the use of universal service and access funds for the deployment of services to marginal areas or to underserved areas, so as to ensure that at least, people have access to affordable services. And most importantly, since there is such an intensive use of technology, we need to make sure that there's a reliable data protection and cyber security for the users. Now, in conclusion, it has been submitted that it is not advisable to have what they call a light touch or hands-off or self-regulations in this ecosystem. This is simply because it is expected that there shall be a heavy data usage and intensity of connection. However, as a country, as regulators, as players in the industry, we have to acknowledge and recognize that we need to have some flexibility in innovative policy that can support and incentivize digital transformation. Of course, we also need to look at the best practices in this regard that will then allow us to respond to the changing landscape and address the continued need for secure, affordable access to reliable ICT services. Now, just before I conclude, I want to just quote a statement that was made by President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa at the SADC summit, where they were discussing the issue of the fourth industrial revolution, whereby he said, the digital economy is an increasingly important driver of economic growth and can play a significant role in accelerating development, embracing productivity of existing industries, cultivating new markets and industries, and achieving inclusive, sustainable growth. I think that sums it up, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for listening. I think I have to play a dual role here, since the MC is... Yes, maybe while the MC is coming, I may just invite questions, if there are questions.
1, 2. All right. Sorry, we're fixing a microphone there. Yes, it's question time, so get about 2 or 3 questions, and if I can also get a hands-free mic. Is there anybody who's got questions for Mr. Mbandeka? I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, sir, but there are no questions. Oh, there's one there. Okay. All right, just a second. Let me get this one. Sorry. Excuse me. Excuse me, sir.
Morning, sir. Thank you for that. What I wanted to ask is, what is the role that CRAN is currently playing in opening up the digital economy for the average citizen, specifically with regards to the finance sector? So, for example, if I wanted to do business, export stuff digitally overseas, but I can't access my money because they don't pay into Namibian financial institutions, you know, what is the role that CRAN is playing to help get that off the ground?
I think there was another hand. Yeah.
Okay. So we'll just get them in advance and you answer them in that order?
Thank you. My name is Steve Besaidnot. I just want to respond to the lady's question. I think CRAN has got a role to play, but more an enabling role. I think the institution that really should focus on payment systems is PAN, the Payment Association of Namibia, so that we can get payment systems that are fast, reliable, users, and cost-effective, so that we can really do what we need to do. The IT sector or the development sector also struggles with the same problem of payment systems. I mean, there are young entrepreneurs in this country who try to set up mobile application. Yet when they come to the payment side, there's nothing. They must go to overseas like PayPal and so on. That is where the block comes in, accessing your money.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Honorable, for that comment. With regard to the questions, I think that question really requires, as I said earlier, that we need to look at flexible and innovative ways and policies how to manage the aspects of use of technology and the digital economy. Obviously, we can only create an enabling environment for the players to play, but issues pertaining to payment, as has been pointed out, those falls within the domain of the financial institutions. And we have had at least some engagement with the financial institutions to see how best they can also make it easier for business to be, to be done in a most cost-efficient way. When there was the process of phasing out checks was being rolled out, we have actually cautioned this process, since people in some areas, not only we are transacting outside, even within Namibia, they have reliance on various modes of payment, and we feel that until such time when you have a proper system that will be able to allow you to transact from anywhere, then you probably need to roll it out in a very gradual fashion. And we also believe that in terms of transactions that are being done between business either within or outside Namibia, we believe that there is a need for flexibility. We need to look at some of our processes, we need to look at some of our policies and systems to be able to, to allow or to enable the business that they want to do business online, payments online, to transact with ease and also at less cost. Obviously, this will then require some coordination that I'm talking about, that we need to engage, as people, so that we are able to see how best we can address some of these barriers.
Okay, I think that's, if there's no other question, I think we can move to the next. Oh, there's another one there.
It's not working. Oh, there we go. Sorry, it's not a question, just a comment. There was a very interesting question that was raised. At 4:15 this afternoon, we're going to have a mini facilitated strategy set. We try and if you want to that will then be submitted and circulated. It will be this of developing a digital strategy going forward. So please do stick around. The lady that asked that question, I'm very interested to hear you about that later.
Okay, I think Mr. Mandeka, thank you so much for that presentation. Please give him a round of applause there. And such is the importance of occasions like this, where we get to tackle different aspects and have people from the audience ask questions and find a solution. And I think that's why such a platform is very important. Now, with that being said, we're not going to waste more time. We move on to the next presentation because we're just a bit behind schedule. So we're going to move on to Biodynamics. We'll have a topic of data governance and protection of personal information in today's business world. And this one will be presented by Kai Walter Hunter. I don't know if you're here, sir. All right, there he is. I think it's a very, very interesting topic. Data protection is something that we throw around online. People are scared to buy things online, keep your photos on Facebook. Are they going to be used? So I'm interested to see what is going to be unpacked in this presentation. Please give him a round of applause.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you all had coffee and you're ready for this presentation. My name is Kai. I don't have an information background, but I have a legal background and a business background. So I'll actually be speaking about data protection today, and I think in the accelerated market that we're working in and the way that the technology is moving, data protection has become one of the most vital and profound things that we as legal practitioners look into, because we obviously want to protect the information and the privacy of every individual. So with that, please sit back and enjoy my presentation. So first and foremost, what is personal data? Personal data relates to anything or relates to the identification of the data subject. So a data subject is anybody, a natural person or a juristic person, usually a natural person like ourselves. It includes anything from your name, your email address, your telephone number, your social security number, and I think the most important one is the financial details that we have and that we provide to, for example, Amazon or to I know, for example, a local company like Simon is now also offering, or they have an online shop. So we're offering these companies the right to use our data, and we also want it to be protected. I mean, we'll get into a couple of slides where we see how much information has been leaked recently, and it is staggering. It's quite scary. So any personal data that relates back to you as a person or as a juristic company. So why do we want to protect data? First and foremost, it is a fundamental human right. It has been signed into the convention or the UN conventions, which we also have signed. And I think it is fundamental for us to be protected, or to have our data protected. It is becoming the highest traded commodity. If we think about it, any data, if I'm a data subject, and we'll just put this into perspective, if we think about Facebook, for example, Facebook has or owns most of the social media networks these days. So they own everything that we know. They own WhatsApp, they own Instagram, they're busy acquiring a couple other businesses. So this corporation owns pretty much everything. So if we think about Cambridge Analytica, for example, when Facebook was involved in a very bad lawsuit against them, when they used a program to basically identify how people were thinking and what they were doing, this caused Facebook to change the mindset of individuals to vote for certain parties. So I'm not going to mention the parties, but I think we all know what I'm speaking about. So it also prevents and limits the amount of cybercrime. So whenever we have good data protection policies in place and legislation, it allows us to, as an individual or as a company, to be protected from cybercrime, or to limit the amount of cybercrime. It also it allows us to create trust with our employees. And this is something that is very important, especially in companies. And I know that HR departments like to collect data. You know, they need it for the employee. But it creates this amount of trust between the employer and the employee. But also it allows us to create a trust relationship between the company, the individual, and the business. So whenever I know that my data is being protected, I'm more likely to invest in a company or buy from them or share my information with them. So if we look at what has happened in the last few years, or not in the last few years, in 2019, for example, the staggering amount of 4.1 billion records have already been leaked into the dark web. So, I mean, that's a staggering amount. That's more than half of our population living in the world. And this was done by a company called Risk-Based Securities. They're a company that specializes in IT risk management in America. And if you look at the three top breaches that took place this year, WhatsApp was one of them. And I know there's a lot of iPhone users, but iPhone is not protected anymore. Forbes released a report where it stated that, give or take, 1 billion records have been lost due to data breach taking place. So I know that at a stage iPhone was one of the best or the most protected phone and company, but they've also been hacked. And even if you look at it, some of the technological companies like Microsoft have been hacked. So it doesn't stop that. Companies are not protected anymore, even our big companies. So if you look at this is what an actual footage looks like when people are hacking each other. So yes, surely Africa is not as affected yet, but there has been data breaches and hacks into Africa as well. But this is what, if you look at it, you can see what this is happening in the world right now. If I had live footage, I'd be able to show you what at this moment is happening, how they're attacking each other, trying to access information on banks, financial institutions, Microsoft, for example. But why am I showing you this? This is the reason why. So this is something that happened in 2009. So a company called Heartland had a staggering amount of 130 million records lost. But if we look at it, if we see they had to pay $110 million to different Visa application banks or to Visa American Express. So this is 2019. Just keep this in mind. If we look at 10 years later, this is what is happening in the world right now. So you can see Facebook, once again at the top list, 419 million records. Marriott Hotel right behind them with 383 million records. And at the bottom there's a little company called Equifax. And I'm just going to quickly speak about Equifax. So Equifax was an American bank and it was hacked in 2017. The approximate amount of information that was stolen at the time was 143 million records. So we're thinking this is 2017, so this is what is happening. And out of that 143 million records, 209,000 credit card numbers were stolen. I mean, that's quite a bit. If I'm a hacker, I've got 209,000 credit card numbers, I'm going to be rich. Not only that, we see there's 182,000 different documents. This includes names, email addresses, and in America they run on social security numbers, so they're very big on the social security number hacks, which allows you access to the ID, the passport, and that's all linked back to your social security number. The reason why I'm speaking about Equifax is, as you can see, they've been fined between 575 and 700 million US dollars. That means that they now need to pay all the information that was lost back, well, first and foremost to the data subject, and they're being fined by the US government. Not only that, they need to offer 5 years of free service to the affected parties. That means, if I were to look at this from a business point of view, the company will probably liquidate. They won't be able to survive. So I'm going to speak a bit about cross-border. So we currently don't have a Protection Information Act in Namibia, or we are busy looking into it. But if I look into South Africa, for example, they have the POPI Act, which is the Protection of Personal Informations Act. This is the South African legal framework that we are currently, or that one currently can access to, or has access to, and it was promulgated in 2013. It has now become legislation, and it basically puts it into a nutshell. We look at the rights of privacy, the protection of data, and how companies will be held accountable if they don't adhere or they don't comply with POPI. So, and I'll just put this in perspective. Some companies will be compliant, even in Namibia. It depends on what company you are and whether you are domiciled as a data object here in Namibia, or if you are registered as a business outside of South Africa. So, and this, just to put this in perspective, whenever I start collecting data of a data subject, then the company will have to become compliant with POPI. So it's basically to protect the rights of the South African data subjects. So whenever I, as a company, let's say X, gathers data from data subjects in South Africa, I will have to become compliant. I'll need to give them a consent, or they'll need to give me consent to use their data. And this can be done either through automated or non-automated equipment. Doesn't matter what we use, if we use survey papers or we have an online shop where we collect data. So this is important for companies that are currently collecting data in Namibia from data subjects in South Africa. So what does a data policy, or what should a data policy at least address? It should at least address the most important criteria, which is your consent, what are you using with the data or doing with the data, and we should look into the data governance within the company. It allows us to, or the policy should at least be implemented on the website of the company so that the data subject can read through the terms and conditions of the data policy, and it must be company specific. It makes sense to have a policy that is company specific. Every company operates in a different market. So what would be the fines if non-compliance does take place? These are numbers that are in South Africa, so I put the Namibian dollar in front of it. They'll range between 500,000 and 10 million. This can be linked to an imprisonment of up to 10 years and possible resignation of CEOs or board directors or board members. But the most important is here, and I believe the most expensive aspect is the severity of reputational damage. Once your reputation is broken or damaged, it is fairly difficult to rebuild that reputation, because goodwill does cost a lot of money. So, going cross-border or international, we're looking at the general data protection regulations. Maybe some of you have heard of it and seen on most of the website. We've got these little cookie policies that we click. That is basically what general data protection regulation does. It was launched globally in 2018 on the 25th of May, and it looks into the processing of data of private or European Union citizens. And I just want to point this out. There's a lot of companies that are collecting data from European citizens in Namibia. For example, your tourist companies, they do collect data. This includes name, email addresses, obviously to organize the tours. And I've always tried to speak to these companies and tell them this is something that you should look into, because the aim of it is to obviously collect, store, and process private data. of these individuals that the companies are using. It strengthens the rights of the individual to use this data. So I'm allowed to tell the company, listen, you've used my data, but I want to get rid of it. Can you please delete it? And they need to delete this from all servers that they have, even if it is a third-party server. And most of the companies are making use of cloud services. So that information needs to be deleted from the cloud service as well. And it needs to basically look into how long and for what reason we're using the information. What it does, it also allows small businesses to play in the field of data collection with big companies. It gives them a little bit more power to also collect, because it is not expensive to implement. You're allowed to help companies out, assist them with the setup of the small companies to collect data. The difference between GDPR and the POPI Act is that it's got extraterritorial jurisdiction. This means that even if the company is registered in Namibia, it's collecting data, it doesn't comply with it, the European Union can sue the company for if there is a data breach and the data subject is able to prove that it took place in a company, for example, in Namibia. So what businesses will be impacted? As I mentioned, businesses that will be impacted are those trading with European citizens or European data subjects, and companies that are trading or collecting data on the internet. As I mentioned, a couple of companies like Simon, for example, and I've seen they are GDPR compliant because they do sell to the European market. And companies like tourist sector should also consider becoming GDPR compliant. If you look at the examples, for example, if we look at the examples, you see there's Facebook and Amazon and Google. These are companies that have been sued for non-compliance, and the amounts are staggering. If we look at, for example, Google, which I have as a case study just now, they've been sued just over 57 million US dollars. But this is the penalties for non-compliance. So we subdivided them into two groups. There's a lower level fine, which will range between 10 million or 2% of world annual revenue, or then the more severe fines, which is 20 million euros or 4% of annual revenue, or annual world revenue. The reasons for this is that we look into how the data was, or what the company did after the data breach took. They usually have between 48 to 72 hours to inform the data or the data subject that data information or private information has been leaked to the dark web. So, protecting your business, we'll be looking at how you inform your customers. So your policy should be drafted as in at least inform your customer or employee when you're collecting personal data. So there needs to be a consent form that says, okay, I'm consenting to what data has been collected or is going to be collected. The amount of, or the longevity of the personal data, for how long you're going to use it or for what it is necessary. If we put this back into perspective, a tour operator would, for example, use the data only as long as the tour is being planned for, let's say 14 days. After that, the data needs to be deleted immediately. We look into, it secures the data or the personal data you are processing. So when you have a third party, like a cloud service, always inform your customer that you are making use of a third party. So there will be agreement between the company and the organization itself. So the third party agreement and the company itself, so they can collect data and that they both, all companies know what is going to happen with the data when you're using a subcontractor. So as I spoke just earlier, we spoke about Google. If you put this into perspective, Google is at this stage the largest search engine. Google receives about 63,000 searches per second. So everybody, I presume, is on Google and we search for information. So when we look at that, when GDPR was implemented, the French regulator sued Google for data breach of around about 57 million US dollars. And it is, for a company like Google, very small if you compare it to the annual budgets that they make, but it is staggering for companies that are on the lower breadbasket or the lower end of the company. So I'm going to speak a bit about data governance and what data governance is and how we can implement this in companies. So data governance is the initiation taken by a company to handle the processing of data. It is basically the overall management of availability, usability and integrity and security of the data used. Any company that is collecting data should have a policy that is in place. This is what a general data governance structure would look like in a company. But I just want to point out to the policy on the far right and the data security on the left. This is the reason why we have policies implemented, for the reason to protect the data or the information that is being collected. And then we run through the whole process. But when drafting a policy, we'll initially look at the reasons for data security and protecting the individual or the data subject from data breaches. And this is also beneficial towards the company, because they can also obviously protect themselves from or against severe lawsuits. So I know that we currently have the King 3 reports and the NAM code in place in Namibia, but there has been an upgrade to the King 3. It is now called the King 4, and it specifically puts pressure on data protection, as which they also have seen that there is quite a substantial amount of data breaches taking place. So what it was launched on the 1st of November 2016. It is a business tool to assist companies, and I specifically looked at managing IT risk within a company and data protection. So King 4 does allow for companies to become more, or the board of directors to become more compliant and more structured in terms of having a proper IT governance or policy in place. It will address specifically the IT governance. And this is what it does. Principle 12 looks at IT governance. It looks at the infrastructure of an organization. It supports the organization to set up and achieve its objectives, long and short term. It places greater emphasis on the board of directors to become compliant and to look into IT protection. And the board is tasked with approval and overseeing the implementation of the policy throughout the company. And this is something that I think is very important, because it places the burden on the board of directors to really implement the right policy in the company. So, data governance policies, in an ever-changing world, I think governance needs to be put in place. So if you ask me whether you should be revisiting your IT policy, I would say yes. It is something that is, and just don't get me wrong, King 4 is not a legislation, it's just a guideline, but it does help for companies to become compliant. And it allows you for your company to be more transparent, accountable, and it allows for companies to take a greater burden off the shoulder. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and if there's any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me.
Do we have any questions?
Thank you. Just a quick question. Would you advise Namibia to go straight for GDPR? Because we get a lot of Europeans coming here and we want to do business with the EU. Would it be advisable for our own policy of data protection just to try to comply with GDPR? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Well, I do believe that we should implement our own data policy and legislation, but when you are trading with a European citizen, then yes, GDPR will become compliant because you're collecting the data of a European citizen. And even if it is, that's why I said when you are working in the tourism sector, you are collecting data of that individual, but you're telling him that you will delete the information, let's say, after 14 days, for example. So it all depends on how long you're collecting the data. And in your policies, you would draft, or you would say that I'll collect the data for a month, 2 months. Whenever you click on that cookie policy, you'll see it states in the cookie policy how long the data will be protected, or for how long it will be saved, and where the location will be saved if it is a third party. So yes, I would say if you are working and collecting data of a European citizen, then yes.
All right, do we have any more questions? Okay, thank you very much. That'll be it. Thank you so much for that performance. Sorry, not that performance, that presentation rather, by Dynamics. Please give him another round of applause. You know, as we're talking about digital transformation and accelerating it, it reminds me of a quote by Bill Gates, and he says, the first rule of any technology used in business is that when you apply automation to any operation, it will magnify the efficiency or it will magnify the inefficiency. So I think what we have been discussing here over the past day and today will really, narrow it down to how we can collectively improve the ICT sector in the country. And I love the questions that are coming out from the audience. So if there's anything you would like to ask, don't keep it to yourself. I mean, that's why we've got the industry professionals here to help us unpack various topics and obviously expand our knowledge on these things. Now, without further ado, I think we should move straight to our next presentation. This one is from one of our sponsors as well, Schoolman's Group, and the topic is the digital transformation journey. This one will be presented by Ian Nell. Please give him a round of applause. Ian.
Good morning, everybody. Is this on? Can everybody hear me? Thank you very much for that informative presentation. I think just by starting off, I'm from Canon, South Africa, and I head up software solutions. And the topic that was just discussed is actually quite relevant in our country, and we hear about the topic of protection of personal information very often. Okay. But without further ado, the digital transformation journey. And hopefully I will bring a little bit of a lighter side to some really intense content that's been shared yesterday and today. And so first of all, I would like to say that there's been quite a big hype around the term digital transformation. With larger organizations rapidly trying to improve on their digital strategies. Because smaller, more nimble organizations and companies are starting to pose a threat to the way that business was done in the past, or it's done currently. And but I think for us to be able to go into that, we need to unpack a little bit of how we got to this point of digital transformation. So I think just to sorry, can you just, where's the clicker? Sorry, man. So, first of all, I would just maybe think I would like to chat a little bit about what has brought us up to this point, the history. And then I would like to chat a little bit about our journey, our current journey, where we are at, the 4 key elements or the 4 driving forces behind digital transformation, as well as maybe we need to carefully assess before we engage with digital transformation strategies, and then Canon's 3 stages of digital maturity. Okay. So, predominantly up to the point where we are now, there has been 2 major waves that has impacted organizations and global economy drastically. First thing would be the introduction. So I might just take some of the younger generation that's here today to a little bit of a history lesson, because you might not have heard this before. Okay, but in the 1960s, IBM introduced relations. This did quite a big impact from 1960 to about 1970. From 1970, we got the introduction of the personal computer. So with the introduction of the personal computer, the workforce became a little bit more flexible. So being more flexible meant that they can schedule their tasks. And instead of just being a centralized environment, now it's more uncentralized. from there we move into desktop applications. So with desktop applications in the 1980s, we're looking at things like, I don't know if you guys would even remember, Word Perfect. Huh? The beginning of Excel, or not really Excel, more calculations-driven processes. And all these things assisted in the workforce becoming more productive. So the first wave, which means digitization, moving from manual work to digital, was already quite a big advancement for the era and the time that we were at. But so as we move from mainframe computers to the PC, and then going to desktop applications, making them more productive, we get in the 1990s work group communications, email. Geez, don't we just dread email sometimes? But ultimately, email has pretty much made the world a much smaller place. And with email, we also had the introduction of portable computing. So at that same time period as the introduction of workgroup communications, we would have portable computing, more mobility, and then just to top it off, towards the end of the 90s, we get the graphic user interface. Apple puts out Mac OS 1, and we have Windows, Microsoft competing with that, coming with Windows version 1.0. I'm sure there's not a lot of you sitting in this room that has actually ever seen Windows version 1.0. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this introduced a graphic user interface, making it more user-friendly for the end user to be able to work on a computer. With that said, now if we look at this digitization and moving into a new sphere, to the next wave, we start talking about the internet. So the internet was, I mean, I'm sure you guys all know the history of the internet. I'm not going to go into the history of the internet as much. But ultimately, ARPANET was established in, I think, in the 1950s sometime. But the organization called CERN, or European Organization for Nuclear Research, they brought the internet or the web into the public domain. Okay. That takes us to our next wave. So from up till about the middle of the 90s, we had the digitization process. This allowed users to become more productive. Organizations started being able to expand operations, etc., making life a little bit easier. But with the introduction of the internet and the HTTP protocol that was developed, I don't know if you guys remember the first browser, or one of the first browsers, called Netscape. So Netscape was introduced, and what did Netscape do? Netscape opened up a global search platform, making it easier for the end user to get information from all around the globe. But Netscape was a static search engine. With the introduction of Web 2.0 in the 2000s, we have interactive applications, non-static applications, allowing more flexibility, greater usability. And then we have the beginning of e-commerce. E-commerce changed the landscape as we know it forever. So we talk about e-commerce and we think, sure, the beginning of Amazon.com, most probably the largest retail environment in the world. And so as we move from these different waves of transformation, sorry, I just want to find my spot here. I also want to maybe just take us just a little bit back and think about the days before the internet. So Namibia is quite popular for tourism. If you wanted to make a booking, you would have to have a travel agent with lengthy itineraries and a lot of manual intervention that needed to take place. If we look at retail, it meant you would actually have to go into a shop to go and buy something. If we look at the financial sector, look at banks having to stand for hours in queues. Now, I know in South Africa you don't really find that very often, that people, even banks, are closing down branches because of the fact that people are no longer wanting to go into a bank. So I think you would possibly agree with me that the internet has disrupted our lives. Out of all these things, from digitization to the internet, was probably the biggest disruption that we've had. Do you agree with me? Yeah. So I think when we look at this big disruption, some of the early adopters with regards to process and taking hold of new technologies would be departments in an organization like finance with enterprise resource planning solutions, as well as HR, because those are relatively quick wins for an organization. So I'm leading to something here. But you know, if we look at these two waves and we think of digitization, the internet, these two big waves assisted greatly with the point to where we are at now. So it sort of laid the foundation for the digital transformation journey. But I think for those guys that haven't seen what a IBM 7090 mainframe looks like, I thought I'll just give you a glimpse. Okay, so if you have a look on the left, I mean, it says IBM, so I'm sure you can't miss it. My son is a third-year electronic engineering student, and if I had to show him a picture of a mainframe or a desktop computer in the beginning, I think he would not believe me. But then we have the graphic user interface. We all know what a graphic user interface is, and then obviously Web 2.0. But when we look at the first wave and the second wave, from the 60s up until about 2010, etc., we will see that there were large or periods of stability followed by periods of rapid change, disruption. Then if we look at digitization, where mainframe computing came in, so there was a period of about 10 years or so where there was a stability. Then there was some disruption with the introduction of the desktop computer. Then we look at the internet, Netscape, static, whatever. And then we have the launch of Web 2.0. And as we go on, we'll see that there's always a trend of periods of stability followed by rapid change and disruption. So I think I would possibly be correct in saying that if we follow trends, we might have to prepare ourselves for the next disruption and rapid change of digital transformation. So if we want to move into this next wave of digital transformation, we would need to really start looking at every process, every connection, every resource before applying methodologies and systems. Moving into digital transformation, going from a first wave, second wave, now taking a look at what the internet has brought us into, I think we could safely say that it's a little bit more of a subtle approach. Even though there's a period of rapid change and disruption, it will also mean that we might have to have a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking, which is not what we are predominantly used to. Let's just see a little bit what the global communications are around the topic of digital transformation. I did a Google search the other day, and when I did that Google search, I saw that I got something like 250 million hits on my first search. But I think the impact of digital transformation is probably the second, other than revenue growth, second on the top of the CEO's priority list. If we look at global searches for digital transformation has risen by 30%. Global spend by the end of this year is $1.7 trillion. They reckon by 2025 to 2030, and this is statistics by McKinsey, and they're looking at about 18 trillion to be harvested from digital transformation. 86% of decision makers say they have a 2-year window for digital transformation before suffering financially. So this brings me to what are the driving forces behind digital transformation? We spoke about the internet, we spoke about hardware, etc. Now we have to look at what are the key driving forces for digital transformation. So if we look at the 4 key driving forces for digital transformation, we look at, firstly, the elastic cloud. We are all familiar with the cloud. We work with the cloud. But what has the cloud done? The cloud has made it more affordable because of economies of scale. The cloud has made previously expensive resources available to the small and medium enterprise. It's made it allowed for more mobility within a workforce. Okay. When we look at the next thing, artificial intelligence. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of times we think of robots and we think of sci-fi. But ultimately, Google, the largest search engine in the world, has been doing artificial intelligence for years with algorithms within their search engine. So looking at the next thing, big data. Big data giving you large data sets and taking those data sets and using the information to make better informed decisions. So looking at the elastic cloud, looking at artificial intelligence, looking at big data, and then last but not the least, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things makes everything connected. You go into your fridge, you take the last egg, and it places a shopping order for you to replenish your eggs. This is not new. This has been done already. But I think if you look at these 4 elements, or these 4 driving forces behind digital transformation, you would agree with me that if we do not adopt some or just a part of these key elements, we might just die. The cloud, artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things has opened up new possibilities and a new entrepreneurial spirit has been deployed in a new generation. We can no longer look at taking a 20th century work environment and pushing in 21st century workforce and thinking they are going to flourish. So if you are running an organization, you're a CEO of an organization, and you see that you're currently struggling and not going forth, and you like really struggling to get a rapid projection of where you want to go, maybe take a look at where are you at with regards to the 4 key driving forces of digital transformation. But with that said, despite the promise of digital transformation, IDC predicts that 70% of digital transformation initiatives will fail. So I think carving this correct strategy is of utmost importance if we would like to succeed. So if we take a look at people, process, technology, if you're in the ICT space, if you're in the information technology space, information management space, these 3 words are very common knowledge to you, and you know about it. But what we do need to know is that we need to know that we have to get buy-in from customers, employees, suppliers, and other external and internal stakeholders, because this is of utmost importance for us to have a digital transformation strategy being successful. Even though we have some digital enhancements with regards to the digital transformation process, some manual processes are also still relevant. So we cannot just remove that. That brings us into what we call a hybrid culture. So what do we do within a hybrid culture? In a hybrid culture, when we build a solution that meets this environment, we need to look at combining manual, digital, and automated processes. So when we look at carving this strategy, we need to make sure that we take a look at some of the things that I've noted today. There are many others. And I think if you go and Google and you go and do a bit of research on digital transformation, you will find much more information. But some people embrace change, while others struggle with it. So we should have a clear communication and digital transformation strategy. Communication is most probably one of the most important things that needs to happen when you deploy any strategy, for that matter. And then, lastly, I would like to say, breaking the digital transformation strategy down into measurable steps with clear goals and objectives. I mentioned earlier that if we looked at the first wave and the second wave of leading us up to this point, you will notice that with the introduction of digitization and the internet, processes were only added. So we went from a manual process to a digital process. But we didn't really change any core processes. Core processes pretty much remained the same during that period. We just went from manual to digital. When we look at a digital transformation journey, I think one of the key stumbling blocks for CEOs in large organizations not moving forward with a proper digital transformation strategy, the fact that now you would have to start looking at what is the core uniqueness of your organization, and are you willing to take the risk to do things slightly different? Smaller, more nimble organizations do this rapidly and quickly because they've got less to lose. Larger organizations have to take a risk. And is the risk worth taking? Because if I've been doing this for 20 years and it's worked, why change? So why are we going to change if we've been doing something for 20 years? But going forward, it doesn't necessarily mean that for the next 20 years, you're going to see revenue growth. Adapt or die. That's what I say. Okay. So Canon has a sort of a maturity assessment that we work towards. Okay. This is pretty much industry specific, based around information management, print management, looking at content within a organization's environment. So how do we determine, or how do you as an organization determine at what level of maturity you are at? So the first thing that we look at is digitized. Many organizations have already embraced digitization. So they already go from hard copy to digital. They have some storage mechanisms like a document management system where they put their content in. So they've already sort of gone into that stage. But many organizations have not gone into an automated stage where they actually move and they make manual processes automated, allowing users and individuals to make better decisions based on task-driven processes, having insight into processes. So a lot of organizations are within this segment. So you could either be in a digitized stage, maybe you haven't even moved over into manual to digital, or you could be already in a digitized state, but you want to, or you've already progressed into an automation stage. But then we look at optimized. Meaning optimization means innovation. These are the guys that have taken the risk. These are the guys that have looked at their core uniqueness and taken the risk to step outside of that sphere to see what they can actually change. So with that said, not all organizations are going to want to rapidly expand into a digital transformation journey. Some organizations will be forced to do that based on customer expectations, legal requirements, etc. But let the move on this digital transformation journey not be one that is a forced decision, but rather something that will project you into a future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neil. Do we have any questions for Ian? Okay, there's one there. Can I please have a microphone?
Hi Ian, thanks.
Hello.
Lovely presentation. It seems that you guys have obviously done quite a bit of research with regards to this. I wanted to ask, have you guys done any research to assess how does digital transformation get impacted when looking at the digital literacy of the people in your organization? So if you're looking at people who aren't possibly at the level that the technology is in or that you want to go to, how does that impact that transformation?
So I think if you look at the 4 pillars of digital transformation, being Internet of Things, etc., I suppose you would possibly agree with me that you'll see that if you look at hardware devices, I'm not talking printers and copiers and things like that, I'm talking about everyday things that we use at home. It's becoming easier to interact with things that we didn't interact with before. If you think of using a smartwatch, using a mobile device. So what's happening and what the trend is, you were asking about what is the trend. The trend is that they are making things more mobile because the mobile acceptance have become much, much larger. So if you look at mobility and how people are interacting with mobility, it's becoming way easier to adopt. So you'll see a lot of the new platforms that are being developed would be developed on a mobile platform instead of a PC-driven environment.
Do we have any more questions? All right, if we don't have any more, thank you so much, Ian.
Thank you.
All right, let's give him a round of applause. Notice lots of people are very serious here today. Nobody's smiling.
Testing.
Don't be too serious. It's quite a social event. And speaking of which, please head over to www.ictsummit.gov.na. You can fill in a questionnaire there, and you could win prizes at the end of today. So the program is there. Wi-Fi is free as well. Yes. So let's engage. Now, how many people like off days? It's just a general question. Don't worry. Even if your boss is here, how many people love off days? You can just... I see you. So you see, a lot of people do different things to get off days. It reminds me of a story I heard one day. So this woman and this man work in a factory, yeah? And the woman is like, I can get the boss to give us an off day, or to give me an off day rather. So the man is like, how would you do that? So she's like, just wait and see. So this is from Neil's presentation. I saw a light bulb. So she was hanging upside down in the ceiling. The boss walks in. What are you doing? And she's like, I'm a light bulb. So the boss goes, you've been working too much. I think you're going crazy. Go home. You need a day off. Now, this man got so surprised, so he just started following her behind. So the boss said, where are you going? He's like, I'm going home too. I can't work in the dark. All right, so don't work too much sometimes. Be social. Say hi to your neighbor if you've never met them before. And let's interact. Now, with that being said, please don't forget to fill in the questionnaires. Very soon we're going to move on to the part of the program where we've got presentations in different venues. But before we get to that, we have one more presentation from Telecom Namibia. And the topic is Intelligent Cloud for Namibia. And this one is going to be presented by TN and BCX Cloud Solution Partnership.
Let's give them a round of applause.
Testing. Okay. Right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ICT Summit. I hope you've had an informative session thus far, and it hasn't been too boring, I hope. I know everybody talks IT, and most more than enough about today. But I thought I'd start with a short little introduction, just what is cloud? And we'll begin with a short video clip.
You know, if you'd have asked 10 different people the same simple question, what is the cloud? There's a good chance you would get 10 different answers. Everyone's heard of it. The majority of people use it, but how do you define it? Many people think of the cloud as a nebulous, invisible place or abstract model. But in reality, the cloud is just a type of computing where individuals and businesses rely on a third party to manage their data and computer processing via the internet. Perhaps a more practical way to think of the cloud is a utility that companies of all sizes are rapidly taking advantage of. Just as gas and electricity providers supply services to businesses and homes, public cloud providers supply secure, reliable and scalable computing from a shared data center that you simply plug into. Traditional on-premises computing is expensive and at times restrictive. You have to pay for the hardware, the software, the licensing, electricity and floor space. Not to mention the time your staff has to spend protecting and maintaining it all. Cloud computing, on the other hand, empowers companies to run faster and cheaper than ever before, simply paying for the resources they consume, when they consume them, and bursting in scale when needed. It's not just pay as you go, it's pay as you grow, and provides companies with the confidence to innovate by creating applications and services on the fly, testing new ideas and features with limited risk and minimal outlay. This is the power of the cloud. It's still servers, storage and networking, but instead of worrying about the maintenance and upkeep, customers can now spend more time innovating and creating new business opportunities.
Here we go. So, cloud computing in a nutshell. Like gas, hey? Sort of. Alright, so basically, it's renting someone else's computer. That's the concept behind it. So instead of having to pay for it all up front yourself, you just rent it from someone else, who in most cases have invested a lot more money than you ever could in the same technology. So, to go on, what we're talking about today is cloud, and there are data centers all across the world. So it's not up there in the sky, guys. It's down here on Earth. So where is it exactly? So here's a little map we've drawn from the internet for all the providers, whether it be Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, all the data centers around the world. As you can see, they're pretty much everywhere. You'll notice the little one down in Namibia. There's a couple of providers here, like Telecom, that has their own data centers as well, and you can obviously leverage off their data centers just by putting your services there. So more than just having to put servers and infrastructure, you can also look at different types of cloud models, and we'll be discussing that next, just to sort of give clarity about the different terminology used in the cloud, which is not always clear. So just a little slide and a breakdown about the different technologies we're talking about today. So usually, the old school way would be to run it on premises. You'd have to invest with everything from the servers, the hardware, the networking, the storage, all the way up to the applications you buy from different vendors, and you'd have to manage it all yourself, which means a lot more staff and a lot more turnover for you and a lot more cost. So what they've done is they've created 3 different models for cloud. One is called IaaS, or Infrastructure as a Service, whereby you then only rent the networking, storage, servers and virtualization from the vendors, whichever ones there may be, and then just pay for them, and they are managed for you. So you don't need to actually go connect cables or worry about the power consumption. All of that is actually done for you. However, in Infrastructure as a Service, you're still responsible for the operating system, Windows, Linux, etc. You'd still need to maintain the patching. You'd still have to have staff actually looking at the technology for you. Whereas a Platform as a Service, it changes a little bit. Platform as a Service, the vendor will take care of everything up to the point except for your data and your applications. So if you've got in-house applications that use databases, etc., Platform as a Service comes in to provide you those databases as a service, for example. So you'd actually have your applications, they connect up to this database, but the actual patching and security and management of that database is done by platform as a service, by the vendor. So then we come to the best one, I think, especially as a home user myself of the cloud, and I'm sure most of you use either Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive, one of these applications, email included, which is software as a service, where they take care of all the stress and you just get the benefit. So that's always a good thing, I think. Software as a service, they literally take care of everything down to the application level. You wouldn't have to worry about having the latest versions. It's always updated and it's always secure. So just to go a little bit deeper down into each definition we've discussed, I've got a slide here that represents the infrastructure as a service, which in a nutshell just basically says that it's virtual machines. So basically your computer virtualized on someone's data center, and it's standing there and you're renting it. You're renting the hard drive space, you're renting the network connectivity, and such further. Then we've got platform as a service, which is a very good one for those companies who have developers. They're a big supporter of platform as a service, because then all the operational stress goes away from the IT departments and the guys can just go ahead and deploy applications quicker. So the goal of that is actually so that someone else takes care of all the underlying infrastructure. And everything except the service you require to build your innovations and collaboration on is already provided and maintained. So software as a service is basically some examples here from Microsoft on the slide, which is Office 365. I'm sure if you haven't started using it yet, you soon will. Google also has their own offering, which is fantastic. But to go on next, why do you consider cloud? So what's the big selling point for you there? As a home user and as a business investor, you'd always look at cost effectiveness of time. So that's flexibility you didn't have before cloud. You'd actually buy a software package, it would be licensed to the machine or the person, and that would be it. Whereas in the software, there's more memory to it, maybe expand the hard drive space. That's vertical scaling. Horizontal scaling is more or less having many of the same machine do the same type of service. So if you've got a website that you're hosting and you've got a server running that on the background, if there's a lot of load on that server, you can automatically have more servers added to it. So that's quite, and it's very reliable, guys. Like I said before, these vendors, such as Telecom, such as many other vendors around the world, have invested quite a lot of money in making sure that they have a reliable service that is secure as a platform. So what is the future like? We've talked a lot about cloud now. So the cloud is obviously, think of it as the world's computer that anybody can rent and tap into. But nobody really talks about the intelligent edge. I've had some of the previous delegates touch on IoT, which is Internet of Things. So your smartwatches, any devices that connect your data, you as a person, sensors, your mobile phone is a great example, your smartwatch is another great example, to these systems. What can you do with this data? Well, I'm on a weight loss program on my cell phone, which is really helping. I don't know about you guys, it's always just after winter, this time of year, you need to put off that extra weight. So a great way is to use these applications on your mobile phones, install them and have your steps being monitored by sensors. It all reports it to a cloud system. And look, I see a lot of heads going like this. So I see a lot of health conscious people in the crowd. That's fantastic. So using these apps, it actually gives you a lot of guidance and information you didn't have access to before, which benefits you as the individual. So here is the future. Of course, I have to promote a bit of Telecom. So you'll see in partnership with BCX, Telecom has now added to their website a new cloud services portal, which offers the software as a service packages from Microsoft. You can register today. You can try out trials. There's, of course, the different Microsoft plans. And you'll notice one distinct difference from buying from other vendors here is that you get Namibian pricing, which is very nice because you don't have to go and convert it for yourself. Be scared of exchange rates. So there you go. You've got the Namibian pricing on the portal. You can sign up for any one of these plans, either as an individual or obviously as a company. They add additional products coming up soon to the lineup, which is many more than just what you're seeing here. I can't scroll down. It's just a slide, but there's a lot more. So please go check it out. It's telecom.com.na/index.php/cloud. So I'll share the link with you. So what happens at the back of that platform? It's quite complex, or it looks so, but it's actually very simple for the end user. The end user only sits on the far corner of the slide. Everything else in this platform that's been provided by the BCX and Telecom partnership actually has a lot more to it. We've got a digital commerce and the platform itself. It offers full ERP, CRM system in the background. We've got the e-commerce store, so everything's online. You can transact with your cards. You can even do EFT payments, which is a nice to have. if you're not too concerned about sharing your card detail online. I'm sure some of you are very skeptical sometimes about doing that. So there's a lot more to this platform that we're now offering in this joint venture that is really coming into the future. I'm going to skip back on that, guys. Sorry. Short little video by one of my inspirational speakers, Mr. Gerd Lennart, about what's happening in the future and the change that cloud is bringing to the table.
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen. The future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
All right, guys, so that's a nice summary. I always find it as a good inspirational video, not to become technology, rather embrace it. And with all the opportunities that cloud and IoT and sensors and devices, smartphones, smartwatches bring to you today, I hope that you've learned a bit more about what that opportunity means and what you can achieve with it. So I foresee an intelligent cloud for an intelligent nation, and I hope you'll join me on the journey. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, do we have any questions?
Seems so. One. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
thank you. I think this is probably just a question that could be based on perceptions or something that always come up. We talk about clouds and cloud computing. The issue of security is always an issue. What is your views on that, and how do you respond to that?
So most of the cloud vendors these days have really gone and invested in security. I myself was blessed enough to attend the Microsoft Inspire event, and them as a vendor especially, they have invested over 63 billion in just security on their platforms. So that's one example. Looking at Amazon Web Services, the other cloud providers, they are all making sure that your data is safe and your data is being looked after. More so than any of our local investors can really provide, because they are literally pouring millions into their solutions around securing your data. There's so much technology out there, even with the SaaS applications. You've got multi-factor authentication these days, so on your mobile phones, if someone logs into your account, you get a pop-up. Is that you or is that not you? So a very important thing is to know that this technology is out there and it's built into the platforms. It's how we use it responsibly that's going to make the difference in terms of security. But the abilities and the features are definitely there, and they're built really hardcore into these solutions that get offered. There's a lot of standards and security compliance like PCI DSS. We mentioned GDPR by the previous delegates as well. And these standards are already catered for in these cloud solutions. So you actually get, for some of them, trust portals where you can log in and do an assessment on your own environment, whether you are compliant or not. So it's fantastic, and yes, it's built into the very heart of all these solutions is security. Does that answer your question, sir? Thank you. Next.
Thank you. My question is basically, you just mentioned a dollar figure that is invested in security.
Yes, it's a big figure.
Now, if it's so secure with Microsoft, why did Microsoft have a breach of data?
Well, everybody can have a breach of data. No one is impenetrable. It's, I think the best sales pitch there usually for the vendors is, we do our best to protect your data. However, humans are most likely where the errors lie, and these breaches happen. It's not always with the technology itself, but with the people. And the responsibility for security starts with every one of us. So you need to be more aware and have awareness around security as well. Never take the chance of putting in the same password twice. Do good practices. Don't stick in a random memory stick you picked up on the street into your computer. You yourself carry as much accountability and responsibility for security as the vendors themselves do. Does that answer your question?
Right. Do we have one last one before we go on a break? Okay, there's nothing coming up. Honorable President note. Always asking questions. I love that he's paying attention. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Oh, I didn't know you can jump there. All right. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for paying attention to all the presentations and taking part. I feel like the same people are asking questions. And the people at the back, I don't know if you're hiding or you're reading, or maybe you're just using the Wi-Fi for Instagram. Yeah, just browsing. But yeah, do take advantage of the free Wi-Fi. Remember, you can fill in an evaluation form or questionnaire, as it's called, on the ICT Summit website. That's www.ictsummit.gov.na. We're going to give away prizes at the end of today, so don't miss out on that. Now, let me just explain a few instructions in terms of the tea break that we're going to have now, because the issue we have on these breaks is some people take too long. Maybe the conversation is nice. Maybe you've met a special somebody here in the audience. We don't know why the tea breaks are taking long, but what we're going to do today is we've got breakaway sessions after the tea break. So you're going to see a couple of ushers from the ICT team, that's the MICT team. They're going to have the papers with the breakaway session name on it. All right, so once we're done with the tea break, they'll indicate which presentation is happening where, and you get to follow them to the venue. Is that okay? All right. So when you get to the venue, then we can get the breakaway in venue A is by NBC with the topic Audience Research Report within the Namibia Financial Services Sector. And then that will be by Sindano Nekundi. And then venue C is going to be by MTC with the topic Shedding Light on MTC NAST MOU as well. So that's the presenter is going to be Adolf Dafinongo, as well as Professor Heike Fischer, I think I said that right, Theophilus. And then venue D is going to be by Cran. And this time it's not Mr. Mbandeka, who did a wonderful job starting off today's presentations, but it's going to be by Jochen Trout. And the topic is going to be the role of the regulator in converging past that and turn right. That big space where we had the tea break yesterday. Enjoy your tea break. We'll be back at 11:15 rather for today's panel discussion. Thank you.